Starting off this countdown, we have Thomas W. Lawson. Thomas W. Lawson was a British stockbroker who in 1907 published a book called Friday the 13th. The story was about a stockbroker who tried to make the entire stock market crash on Friday the 13th, hence the name of the book. Little did he know that he would eerily predict the future. On Friday, December 13th of 1907, a ship named Thomas W. Lawson, named after a completely different Thomas W. Lawson, not the author, set sail on her first transatlantic voyage. That day, she sank. Isn't that bizarre? A ship named Thomas W. Lawson crashed and sunk on Friday the 13th. I'm telling you, this guy predicted the future whether he meant to or not. Moving on to number 9, we have the start and end of America's Civil War. In July of 1861, Wilmer McLean's Virginia home was involved in the first battle of Bull Run. In fact, the general of the battle wrote a diary entry about a cannonball crashing through McLean's kitchen. He wrote, and I quote, "A federal shell fell into the fireplace of my headquarters at the McLean house." Now, due to safety reasons, McLean moved his family home from the front lines to a new home in Appomattox County. Well, guess what? The battle ended up ending in his parlor in 1865. So it started in his backyard and ended in his parlor. So he was involved in the beginning and the end. Moving on to number 8, we have the birth chart. This story was shared by Raina Lee R on Reddit. So according to her, her brother's doctor would always get his chart mixed up at the office. And that's because there was another kid under his care with the same first and last name. To make things weirder, they were both born on the same day, just different months of the same year. And their mothers had the same name. What are the odds of that? I'll be saying that a lot in this video, so get used to it. But for someone to have the same first and last name as you, it's absolutely wild. And the same doctor. I just hope that they met and became best friends. Coming in at number 7, we have the Marks. This story was shared by Pata95 Nishta on Reddit. And this story is about to blow your mind. So according to her, her best friend from elementary school has 3 sisters. All 3 sisters grew up to marry engineers. Not only that, but all of their husbands were named Mark. And her best friend, I guess, followed this tradition because when she got older, she also married an engineer named Mark. What are the odds that all husbands' names were Mark and all of them are engineers? This is wild to me. Like, did the sisters do that on purpose? Are all engineers just named Mark? Also, that must be so confusing at family get-togethers and dinners. In our 6th spot, we have the meteor. So it said that the odds of being hit by a meteor is 1 in 840 million. So the odds of this happening are very, very, very slim. It's next to impossible. Well, the impossible happened to a family in France. One night they were hit by a meteor which had been flying through space for more than 4.5 billion years without hitting a target. Then all of a sudden it just crashed into their home. Thankfully, no one was hurt. The odd part here is that the family's last name was Comet. So, out of all families and homes to hit, it hit the family with the name Comet. That is truly bizarre. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Anthony Hopkins. In the early 1970s, Anthony Hopkins was casted to play Koista in The Girl from Petrovka. This film was based on the book of the same name. Now, to prepare for the role, he was going to read the book. However, he was unable to find any copy of the book in any bookstore. He searched all over the place, but to no avail. Then, randomly one day, as he was sitting in the London tube station, he found a copy of that book just laying around. Not only that, but when he opened the book, he found that it was signed by its author. Literally, the universe brought him what he was looking for. What are the odds of someone leaving that book behind and then Anthony finding it? The very book he was desperately looking for. Coming in at number 4, we have the Close Calls. In 2014, Dutch cyclist Martin de Jong had plans to head from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. He was scheduled to be on Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. But before his flight, he bumped his ticket up to catch a later flight because it was cheaper. That is the airline that was shot down while flying over eastern Ukraine. All passengers lost their lives. That's not all. In March, he had a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Again, he decided to bump his ticket up at the last minute to get a cheaper deal. And it's a good thing that he did. He was scheduled to be on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, the one that disappeared, never to be seen again. So Martin escaped death twice, all because he wanted a better deal and save some money. He He's a lucky, lucky man, but also unlucky that he was supposed to be on both of those flights. In our third spot, we have the plum pudding. Mathematician Joseph Mazur shared this creepy coincidence involving French poet Émile Deschamps with plum pudding in his book Fluke. So back in the day, a man named Émile was first introduced to plum pudding by a man named Mr. de Forgebus. From that moment on, every time he had plum pudding, he would encounter Mr. de Forgebus, and I hope I'm saying his name right. The second time he had plum pudding, he was at a restaurant and ordered it, but the waiter was like, "Sorry, we just sold the last pudding to this man," and points to the back of the restaurant. Lo and behold, it was Mr. de Forgebus. A decade later, he went to a dinner party, and at the party, they were serving plum pudding. Émile made a joke like, "Who's this party for, Mr. de Forgebus?" And at that very moment, he walked through the door. But he wasn't even supposed to be at that party. He had accidentally come to the wrong door on his way to another dinner party. So what are the odds that every time that this man had plum pudding, Mr. de Forgebus was there? It's kind of like Beetlejuice, you say his name 3 times and he'll appear, except in this case, you have plum pudding and he'll appear. Moving on to number 2, we have Flight 666. Now this one gives me the absolute creeps. On Friday the 13th, Flight 666 departed from Copenhagen and landed in Helsinki, aka HEL, hell. Let me say that again for you. Flight 666 flew to hell on Friday the 13th. I don't know about you, but if I was scheduled on that flight, I would cancel immediately. I ain't taking no chances. But thankfully, the flight landed safely in Helsinki. Thank gosh it did, because that seems like one cursed flight. It's plain creepy how it lined up exactly like that. Pun intended. Get it? Plain creepy. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the prediction of James Dean's death. On September 30th, 1955, James Dean died in a car accident. He was only 24 years old. And it seems like a man named Alec Guinness actually predicted this would happen. He warned Dean and said, and I quote, "If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week." A week later, Dean was involved in a terrible car accident and he sadly lost his life. In fact, Alec had said that the car was sinister, and I think he's right. Later, parts of the car were recovered and resold and placed into other cars. All the car owners who had parts of James Dean's car were also involved in deadly crashes. Not only that, but the mechanic working on the car died after the car rolled off the back of a truck and crushed the legs of the mechanic. So Alec was onto something here and tried to warn Dean. Starting off this countdown, we have Jean-Marie Dubarry. On February 13th, 1746, a French man named Jean-Marie was executed for the murder of his father. Hundreds of years later, on the exact same day, a man named Jean-Marie Dubarry was also sentenced to death. He had also taken the life of his father. So what are the odds that 2 unrelated people with the same name both killed their fathers and then got executed on the same day? Like, that is just way too freaky. In our 9th spot, we have the dollar bill. Now, this is a pretty wholesome one for you all. When a woman named Esther was young, she had written her name on a couple of dollar bills after a bad breakup. She then told herself that she was going to marry the man that brought the bill back to her. Well, years later, she was dating a man named Paul Gratchen. The day he asked Esther to be his girlfriend, they were at a sandwich shop. As he was paying for the meal, he got handed a dollar bill with the name Esther written on it. The bill she wrote years prior. And in the end, they ended up getting married. Now, how wholesome is that? The universe literally gave her what she had manifested. Coming in at number 8, we have the girls with the red balloon. In 2001, a 10-year-old girl named Laura Buxton decided to release a red balloon from her front yard with a message on it. The balloon said, "Please return to Laura Buxton," and it had her address written on it. Well, this balloon traveled 140 miles and ended up landing on the yard of another 10-year-old girl's house. This girl's name was also Laura Buxton. Like, what are the odds? The 2 Laura Buxtons ended up meeting and they discovered that they had tons of similarities, not just their age and name. For example, they both had a guinea pig, a gray rabbit, and a 3-year-old chocolate lab. They both also looked alike and dressed alike. I'm telling you, this is just way too freaky. Like, what are the odds? I'm gonna be saying that a lot in this video. What are the odds? Moving on to number 7, we have Mark Twain and Halley's Comet. Every 76 years, Halley's Comet is visible to the naked eye as it soars past Earth. Well, American writer Mark Twain was born on one of Halley's Comets passing in 1835. The next year that the comet was said to pass was in 1910, and Mark Twain predicted that he was going to die that year. He said that he came into the world with the comet and that he was going to leave the world with the comet as well. And Mark Twain was right. Mark Twain passed one day after the comet's closest approach in 1910. So not only did Mark Twain predict his own death, but his birth and death both seamlessly lined up with Halley's Comet. How freaky. In our 6th spot, we have Violet Jessop. Violet Jessop has been named the luckiest woman as well as the unluckiest woman. She also has been given the name Miss Unsinkable, and I'll explain how she got those nicknames in just a second. So Violet was a stewardess and nurse who was on board 3 big sister ships when disaster struck each of them. It started with the HMS Olympic. She was on board the ship when it collided with the HMS Hawk. Then she was on the HMHS Britannic when it struck a mine at sea. And lastly, she was on board the Titanic, and she managed to escape all 3 of these disasters. At this point, she probably was cursed, and after the first accident, she shouldn't have gotten back on any ships ever again. So that's why she's been given the name the luckiest, unluckiest woman to live. She's been lucky to survive all the accidents, but unlucky that they kept happening to her. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Daniel du Toit. The irony behind this next story is mind-blowing. So Daniel du Toit was a South African astronomer. Over his life, he discovered and co-discovered several comets. He also spent his days giving lectures. On September 28, 1981, he gave a lecture on how death can strike anyone at any time. As soon as the lecture was done, he popped a mint into his mouth. The mint then slid to the back of his throat, he choked on it, and died right then and there. So yeah, I'd say his lecture was pretty spot on. In our 4th spot today, we have Harry Zigland. Now, this story is kind of controversial. Some say it's an old wives' tale. Others say that it actually did happen. Now, if it did happen, then this is the definition of karma. So back in the day, there was a man named Harry Zigland who broke a woman's heart. She was so heartbroken that she took her own life. Her brother was so devastated and angry at Harry that he vowed to get revenge on him. So he went out to find Harry with his gun and shot at him. Harry fell to the floor, and the brother, thinking that he had succeeded in killing him, grabbed his gun and took his own life. But Harry survived. The bullet didn't strike him. Instead, it hit and got lodged into a nearby tree. 3 years later, Henry was using dynamite to remove the tree. When he blew it up, the explosion sent the bullet out of the tree, and it hit and instantly killed him. It took karma 3 years, but it finally caught up to him. Coming in at number 3, we have the Hoover Dam. Over the course of the construction of the Hoover Dam, there were 96 deaths. The first death was of a man named J.G. or George Turney. It occurred on December 20th, 1922. He sadly lost his life after drowning in the dam. 14 years later, on the exact anniversary of this guy's death, his son, Patrick Turney, lost his life. He fell from an electrical tower and died. This was also the final death reported during the construction of the dam, meaning the first man to die and the last man were father and son, and it happened on the exact same day. Coming in at number 2, we have Jack Frost and Other Stories. Some things are just meant to be, and you'll believe this once you hear this next story. Children's book author Anne Parrish was with her husband in Paris when they stopped by an antique bookshop from the 1920s. While in there, she found a copy of Jack Frost and Other Stories. She told her husband that that was her favorite book as a child. Well, when he opened the book, it had her name written inside of it. It read Anne Parrish, 209N Weber Street, Colorado Springs. So not only did it have Anne's name in the book, but it had the place she grew up in, Colorado Springs. Seems like Anne was meant to find that book. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the 2 presidents. It turns out that Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy share a lot of eerie coincidences. Besides the fact that they both were American presidents, they both were killed by a gunshot wound to the back of the head. They both passed away on a Friday. They both died before a celebration. Kennedy was assassinated on the eve of Thanksgiving. Lincoln died right before Easter. And each were accompanied by their wife and another couple when they were killed. But that's not all. They both had best friends named Billy Graham, both Billys had 4 children, and they both had secretaries named after the other president. Kennedy's secretary was Miss Lincoln, Lincoln's secretary was John. But wait, there's even more. Both of their successors were vice presidents called Johnson. The freakiest coincidence, Lincoln was shot in Ford's theater. Kennedy was shot in a Lincoln made by Ford. Whoa, boom, mic drop. Isn't that insane? I thought so. It blew my mind. Starting off this countdown, we have the 4th of July. The 4th of July is a big celebration in America. The holiday marks the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But did you know that a lot of US figures have died on July 4th? In fact, 3 of the first 5 US presidents died on this date, 2 within hours of each other. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both died on July 4th, 1826. The 5th president, James Monroe, exactly 5 years later passed away as well. Seems to be a deadly date for presidents. Like, what are the odds? In our 9th spot, we have Barbary Shore. Barbary Shore is a novel written by Norman Mailer. It's about a character who rents a room in a Brooklyn boarding house in order to write a novel. Then a minor character is introduced, and it's his neighbor who turns out to be a Russian spy. Well, after the novel was finished, Mailer's neighbor was arrested for being a Russian spy and hiding out in his apartment, just like in the book he wrote. And he had no prior knowledge of his neighbor. Now that's freaky. In our 8th spot, we have The Omen. The Omen is a 1976 horror movie that caused a number of real-life tragedies. As a result, it's been called a real-life horror movie or a cursed one. A number of the cast members got into horrific accidents. For example, special effects consultant John Richardson got into a crash, and his assistant Liz Moore was cut in half during an accident, similar to the death of a character in the actual film. That's not all. The screenwriter and executive producer were both on different planes that got struck by lightning on different occasions. It's just wild how so many cast and crew members experienced tragedy after working on the film. Is this a coincidence, or is the film actually cursed? In our 7th spot, we have William Shakespeare. More like William Shookspeare, because I was shook after hearing this. So Psalm 46 in the book of Psalm reads, "Here was I like a psalm." The freaky part is that this is an anagram for William Shakespeare. Arrange the letters and it spells his name. But wait, it gets weirder. The 46th word in Psalm 46 in the King James Bible is shake, and the 46th word from the end is spear. And how old was William Shakespeare when the King James Bible was first completed? He was 46 years old. So someone explain this to me. Please go ahead. Try and explain this. Coming in at number 6, we have the Jim twins. In 1940, a set of twins were put up for adoption when they were only 3 weeks old. They both ended up getting adopted by different parents, so they got separated. They were raised differently, however, both lived near identical lives. First off, we got their names. Both adoptive parents named their son James, but the boys wanted to be called Jim. So you got Jim Lewis and Jim Springer. Keep in mind, they lived separately and had no contact with each other. Gets weirder. Both Jims had a dog. They both named the dog the same. They named it Toy. In school, they both enjoyed math and carpentry, but had trouble with spelling. Both Jims went on to marry a woman named Linda. Then they both ended up divorcing Linda, and then they married again. This time, they both married a woman named Betty. So you're telling me that they both married someone with the same name, not once, but twice? What are the odds? Later on in life, both of them had a son. They both named their sons James Allen. They both drove the same car in the same color, and both were chain smokers. In 1979, both the Jims actually met each other and realized just how similar they were. Like, this is wild. They had the same habits and everything. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with My Way. My Way is a beautiful song by Frank Sinatra, but it also might be cursed. Why do I say that? Well, at least 6 people were killed in the Philippines between 2000 and 2010 while singing My Way. Karaoke is a pretty popular pastime in the Philippines. However, this song is now associated with bad luck there. One time, a man was shot by a security guard for singing this song badly at a bar. Others were killed for hogging the microphone, and quite a few were killed for singing the song on repeat. Due to the repeated deaths, the song is actually banned from ever being sung or played in bars. In our 4th spot today, we have the license plate. World War I began after Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in his car on June 28, 1914. The car's license plate read AIII-118, which wasn't a big deal until people realized that this was the date that World War I ended. November 11th, 1918, aka 11/11/18, just like the license plate. Now, this car was placed in a museum in Austria, and it sat there for almost 2 decades before a British tourist noticed the significance of the license plate. So literally, World War I started and ended with this car. Coming in at number 3, we have Catherine and Mary Kelly. On November 28, 1888, a woman named Catherine Eddowes was arrested after being found drunk on the streets of London. When she was taken in by the police, she gave them a fake name. She told them her name was Mary Kelly. Later, she was released. However, that night she was murdered by none other than Jack the Ripper. The freakiest part is that that same night, Jack went on to kill another woman, none other than Mary Kelly, the random fake name that Catherine gave the police, who is actually a real person and also got killed. How scary, but also how tragic. In our 2nd spot, we have the Disney lovers. In the early 2000s, engaged couple Alex and Donna were looking through some old photos when they came across one of Donna and her siblings at Disney. While in the background of the photo, they spotted none other than Alex and his family. Alex is the boy in the stroller being pushed by his father. So not only did they go to Disney at the same time, they just so happened to be in the same spot at the same time and got it on camera. I guess that's how you know that your love was meant to be. Years later, they decided to take their kids to Disney and recreate this iconic photo. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the lightning strike. There is a 1 in 500,000 chance of being hit by lightning. There's a 1 in 9 million chance of being struck by lightning twice. What about being struck by lightning 3 different times? This happened to a man named Major Walter Summerford. He was struck by lightning 3 different times throughout his life and survived. Not only that, but when he did pass away, his gravestone was also struck by lightning. What are the odds of that? Like, did he piss off Zeus or something?